Hello, and welcome to Book Solid, New Canaan Library's podcast for adventurous readers across all genres. I'm your host, Kathleen, a collections librarian.
I'm your host, James, a reference and instruction librarian.
And I'm your host, Kat, a children's librarian.
And today we're doing something a little different. We're going to be talking about some of our summer reads and how they tie into the library's summer reading program.
Yes, that's right. This is our special summer reading episode, which is in collaboration with the New Canaan Library Adult Summer Reading Challenge. The Adult Summer Reading consists of 20 different challenges designed to help kickstart your summer reading. The rules are you can only submit one book per challenge, and if you think a book counts or you think you can make what you read count for whatever the criteria of the challenges are, it counts. This is all about having fun and enjoying your summer reading. You can track your progress of these challenges online, and to learn more about how to do that, you can feel free to stop by the reference desk where we'll be happy to help you get started.
If you've done New Canaan Library's children's reading challenge that we do every year for summer reading, you're already going to be familiar with Beanstack, the app that you can use to track summer reading for kids, and now this year for adults. If you don't like to use Beanstack, I believe there's going to be a paper way to log your reading as well.
Yes. So what we'll be doing today is we'll be recommending books for 12 of the book challenges. There's also, I believe, an activity challenge as well. But the others we can't easily recommend as they depend upon things like personal experiences, like set in a place that you haven't visited. So if this sounds like something you're interested in, adult summer reading starts on June 26th and ends on September 2nd. So if you're listening to this before the challenge has actually started, you can use this to maybe start planning ahead.
And if you're not interested in the summer reading challenge at all the books we're recommending, I think we would kind of recommend regardless of whether or not they fit for the challenge. So just stick around if you're looking for books to take with you on vacation or whatever else you're doing this summer. I'm actually starting us off with a wild card. So this is not a book I picked for any challenge in particular, although it does fit in a few. This is one of my favorite releases of 2025. It's Woodworking by Emily St. James. This could fit into fiction. It also fits into check out our digital collection challenge because we have the audiobook available on Libby. I would count this for set in the past because the book is set in 2016 and it is very much set in 2016. And that does feel like a whole other world. It's almost a decade ago at this point. So I personally would count that. Woodworking is a really heartwarming story about a high school teacher in South Dakota who comes out as a trans woman and realizes that the only other trans woman she knows is actually one of the students at the high school. So they form this sort of awkward friendship as they're dealing with all of this drama around and coming out. I found this to be such a wonderful and heartwarming and inspiring and emotional story. The audiobook is also exceptional. There are multiple narrators and they perform it just to a T. So I highly recommend checking out the audiobook on Libby.
All right, so I'm going to get started with one of the challenges. So if you are listening to this before the Summer Reading Challenge has officially started, this might be a little bit of a sneak peek. I have chosen from page to screen, read a book that was adapted to film TV, and the book that I chose was Bonjour Tristesse by Françoise Sagan, which is actually an older book, but I saw that there is an adaptation coming out this summer, so I thought it was a good time to recommend it, and it's a book that I think is a lot of fun. So in addition to fitting the criteria for something that's been adapted to movie or TV, it's also going to be a book in translation, a New Canaan classic, which is something we can talk about a little bit later, and it also takes place in summer. So there are a lot of categories that this could fulfill the requirement for, although you can't use it for all of them, just pick one. So this is a book that I enjoyed because it is a coming-of-age story written by an actual teen, which I thought was really interesting. So the author was 18 when it came out. It's this publishing sensation in 1954, but it feels pretty timeless. It's about a 17-year-old girl named Cecile who is enjoying this carefree summer with her widowed father, and then everything changes when her mother's best friend, her mother died when she was very young, and her mother's best friend, Anne, shows up and insists that Cecile start getting serious about her future. Her father is pretty lax with her, so Anne is a totally different force in her life. She really respects her, but at the same time, she resents all of the restrictions on her freedom. And so when it becomes clear that Anne and her father are planning to get married, she hatches this scheme to break them up, and it goes terribly wrong. So it's a short novel, but super engrossing and very fun. You can't look away, even though the characters are varying degrees of terrible.
Interesting. So my pick is going to be for the classic challenge, which is Old Favorites, read a book from the curated classic collection the New Canaan Library has recently unveiled on the top level, right as you come up the top of the stairs, of the main staircase. To the left is a new classics collection. And this is a book from that collection, which is The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. And this selection works not only for the old favorites category, but also for read a work of fiction, and also for the glimpse into the past, which is read a book set in the past. So The Bloody Chamber is one of my favorite kinds of books, which is over the summer when I'm feeling maybe a little bit lazy with my reading. There's really nothing that I love more than to curl up with a little book of short stories. And The Bloody Chamber is a collection of adapted classic stories which takes familiar tales like Bluebeard, Beauty and the Beast, Little Red Riding Hood, and it spins them into these new and fascinating versions. Out of these collections, my favorites would be The Bloody Chamber, which is a really vivid and kind of visceral reinterpretation of the Bluebeard story. And my all-time favorite would be The Lady of the House of Love, which is just a phenomenal gothic vampire story. It's almost indescribable how much I love that specific story here. If you're a fan of like gothic, slightly gory fables, with there's a little bit of sensuality in some of these too, so it's kind of really out there in some places. Definitely check this out. This is a great read, especially if you're into those gothic tales.
The Bloody Chamber is one of my favorite stories of all time, and I began silently cheering when you mentioned The Lady of the House of Love, because I do think it's one of my favorite short stories of all time. And speaking of vampires, one of my challenges that I chose was Glimpse into the Past, read a book set in the past, and I picked a vampire story. So my pick is Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. This also counts for checkout or digital library because the audiobook is available on Hoopla, which is how I read it. It's also a work of fiction. It's set in the past. This is actually a retelling of the classic novel Carmilla. We follow the wife of a steel magnate in northern England. They move to this big empty house, and on their trip there, they run into a carriage, that has been in a horrible accident with one survivor. There's no one else to be seen. A strange, extremely pale woman emerges from the wreckage, and they take her in on hospitality while she recovers. This is a book about a woman sort of learning her place in the world and learning just how more she's capable of than sort of the strictures she's been confined in. She's around 30 at the start of the novel and has not had any children, so she's sort of seen as a failure by everyone. And her relationship with this vampire sort of thrusts the novel into this very cathartic, horror-filled sort of plot. I found it a little bit predictable, but in the best way, like watching a horror movie where you can see the end coming. Highly recommend.
Nice. That's a great setup. All right, so for the challenge, try a translation, read a translated book. I wanted to recommend Sister Deborah by Scholastique Mukasonga, which is translated from the original French by Marc Polizzotti. And the ebook is on Libby, so you can either read the physical book or you can check it out on Libby. So this is a book I immediately had to pick up because the premise was so specific and unusual and fascinating to me. It's set in Rwanda in the 1930s. It's divided into 4 parts, which all basically tell different sides of this story involving this healer prophet character named Sister Deborah. So it starts with this girl who's a sickly child who gets healed by Sister Deborah. She goes on to have like this very blessed life where she becomes a successful scholar in the United States. And she's always kind of consumed by the thought of whether or not Sister Deborah, who's kind of mythical in her mind at this point, had any kind of like mystical healing powers and whether that really did have an effect on the trajectory of her life. So she decides to go back to Rwanda and investigate this. The story jumps around between different versions of this Sister Deborah mythology, and it changes completely based on who's doing the telling. So, you know, you have that one perspective, and then you have Sister Deborah's own perspective of what happened, and then just different stories that people tell. It has a lot to say about colonialism and feminism and just the way we construct a narrative. So it was really fascinating and unlike anything else that I had read in the past year. I highly recommend it.
Speaking of books that are kind of unlike anything else you've read, my pick for a book set in a library, which is the Calling All Library Lovers, read a book set in a library challenge, is The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins, which works for the library prompt. It also works for fiction, and it's also an audiobook that you can check out on Hoopla at the moment. The Library at Mount Char is an interesting book to talk about because I always have a lot of trouble trying to explain what exactly is going on here. It's kind of an urban fantasy. It's about the titular library at Mount Char, which is this bizarre, enormous library that's hidden from the world and presided over by a man who goes by the name Father. He raises our main character, Carolyn, and her 11 siblings, who she's not related to, any of them. Her and her siblings were told to limit themselves and dedicate themselves to studying specific sections of the library. And this kind of odd childhood has led to some of them developing psychic powers and also pitting them all against each other and kind of making them hate each other. And the book begins with everybody having been kind of mysteriously locked out of the library. And Carolyn and her siblings are very determined to get back in there and figure out what is going on. And a lot of people are going to die before anybody gets their way. It's a really kind of gory, dark urban fantasy, very funny at times. I've never read anything like it. It's one of the most unique takes in the genre I've ever read.
I like that every part of your description took another turn. I was never sure where it was going.
You will not see half the things coming in this book.
All right, next up, I wanted to recommend something for the category Not Just for Kids, read a graphic novel. So for that one, I chose Spent by Alison Bechdel, which just came out in May. I mean, first of all, I think that probably the best way to read this is if you have read Alison Bechdel's previous works, because this one is incredibly meta. It's a lot of fun either way, but I think you'll probably get the most out of it if you've read some of her previous things. I think her most famous work probably is Fun Home. And so she's doing a lot of funny things with that. In this book, it's a book called Death and Taxidermy, which has been turned into a TV series that's very popular that she's watching with her friends, and it's going in really wild directions that she's not always happy with. So it's really wild to see the changes that she makes in terms of what you think you might know about Alison Bechdel and then her life in this book, in which she runs a pygmy goat sanctuary. She's still a successful cartoonist, but there are just many, many details that are very changed in very funny ways. So it talks about her uneasy relationship with money, late-stage capitalism. The full-color illustrations in this are really gorgeous, and it's so fun and witty and thoughtful. So I just had a great time reading it.
Well, something that I've been having a great time rereading recently is my pick for a book that's set in the future, which meets the look into the future, read a book set in the future category, and that is All Systems Read by Martha Wells. This also counts for the fiction category. It's also an ebook and e-audiobook that you can get off of, I believe, Hoopla right now. And it also works for the page-to-screen category because they recently made this into a TV show. So All Systems Read follows it's a science fiction adventure, and it kind of follows a character named Murderbot, which is a security human-robot hybrid that has hacked the code, which forces it to follow the orders that it gets given. And instead of trying to go off and exterminate humanity and take its revenge, it discovers the simple joys of watching TV and consuming media and decides the best way to keep doing that is probably to just keep doing its job. So it decides to fake being under control of the company that rents it out and just hangs out while catching up on its favorite shows. When a routine job protecting some weirdly nice scientist starts to go wrong, Murderbot is forced to have to solve a weird mystery, protect its clients, and keep its secret under wraps the whole time. It's fun, funny, and incredibly, surprisingly heartfelt. This is a wonderful book. It's a little novella. It starts off a great series. It's a great read.
Oh yeah, it's one that I've read several times at this point and kind of never gets old. But something new to me that I read recently that I actually think might be my favorite book of the year is the book I picked for the category Learn Something New, Read a Nonfiction Book. And that book is a River Alive by Robert McFarlane. This book is also on Hoopla, so again, it counts for our check out our digital library challenge. This book also takes place in a bunch of different locations, including Ecuador, Chennai, India, and northern Quebec in Canada. So if you haven't been to at least one of those places, I would say you could count it for the challenge, a place you haven't been. So if you enjoyed our Braiding Sweetgrass episode, I highly recommend this book. In Is a River Alive, McFarlane explores the concept of parts of the natural world having personhood, what that means sort of in terms of legal rights. So he covers the rights of nature movement, a really simple argument for which might be, if a corporation can count as a legal person, why couldn't a mountain or a river or a forest? As a way of exploring this question, McFarlane does sort of portraits of 3 different rivers: a thriving river in a cloud forest in Ecuador, a dying river in Chennai, India, and a threatened river in Canada. And along the way, we meet a lot of activists and artists and scientists who are trying to look after and relate to these rivers in a way that is very opposed to our very fast-paced modern way of looking at life. I found this book to be incredibly moving. I will say I was already biased because I grew up beside a river, and I often say that it kind of raised me. But I think regardless of your relationship to rivers, especially if you're someone who likes to go camping or traveling in the summer, you'll probably get something really thoughtful out of this book.
So for the last category that I have a recommendation for, read to your inner child, read a YA or children's book, I chose a YA book, When the World Tips Over by G.N.D. Nelson. So we have that as a physical book at the library as well as an e-audio on Libby. So I think this is a YA book with a lot of adult crossover potential. It's kind of this sweeping epic. It's very immersive. I think it would make a great TV series. If you're the kind of person whose comfort rewatch is old episodes of Gilmore Girls, I think you'll really love this book. It's got the kind of quirky town and huge ensemble cast. It centers on the 3 siblings in the Fall family, Miles, Dizzy, and Winton, and their individual encounters with a mysterious rainbow-haired girl who shows up in town. It's full of family curses, life-changing souffles, and a dog that might be immortal. One thing I really enjoy about Jandy Nelson's writing is that she writes characters that are flawed but still very sympathetic. The setting is also a huge plus, so it's this quirky, magical town in California wine country. It's richly detailed, absolutely feels like a place you would want to visit. The book is like 500 pages long, but I could have easily read another 500 pages. It's that immersive.
That sounds really good, actually. I will have to pick that one up. Now for something completely different. I have read a book that in a genre I normally don't read. So my pick for Summer State of Mind, which is read a book set in the summer, is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, which is a romance book. Wild, I know. As you might guess, I'm not a huge romance reader, but people who enjoy the genre will not go wrong with this book, which is about 2 people, Emma and Justin, who are very similar in quite a few ways, but one of which is that they both jokingly accept the idea that they're cursed. The specific curse seems to be that whoever they date is going to break up with them. And then after they have broken up, the next person they date turns out to be their soulmate. So they meet each other online, these 2, and they say, let's take advantage of these mutual curses and see what happens, and we'll do it over the summer. We'll just do it just for the summer.
James, do they do it just for the summer?
They do it just for the summer.
Okay.
However, things get pretty complicated when, over that summer, Emma's troublesome mother finds her way back into Emma's life. Justin is kind of dealing with the fact that he's about to take guardianship over his 3 younger siblings as his mother's about to go to prison. And then they also start to fall for each other, which kind of ruins the whole plan.
Never would have guessed that part.
It's a genuinely fun read. There's incredible character work going on here, and there's a lot of depth. It also works for a place you've never been because they go to Minnesota. If you've never been there in Minnesota, it works for that category too.
There you go. My next pick is also Read to Your Inner Child. As a kid's librarian, I couldn't pass up recommending a middle grade book, and this book is also set in the summer. This is Magnolia Wu Unfolds It All by Chanel Miller. This book was recently given a Newbery Honor this year, which was so exciting because I loved this book. This is a really charming book about Magnolia Wu, whose parents run a laundromat in New York City, and she is a elementary / going into middle schooler looking for something to do over the summer. One thing they have in the laundromat is a pin board that Magnolia has put herself in charge of where socks that are missing their pairs are a sort of pseudo lost and found. Like, if you lost your sock here, come check the pin board. And she and her new friend decide that their goal over the summer is to walk around their neighborhood and try to find these socks, their missing halves, and try and figure out who they belong to. It is an incredibly charming and really funny and absurdist book. I really love Chanel Miller's artwork. The book is actually illustrated, and I highly recommend picking it up physically, if only so you can look at her wonderful cartoon style. We do also have the e-audiobook on Libby, though, which is read by Chanel Miller herself, so you really can't go wrong either way. Just a really charming read. if you are a grown-up, you'll get through this in an afternoon. So highly recommend it. And also share it with your kids. I think they would love it too.
That's an adorable premise.
It's great.
All right, so now we're into our wildcard recommendations. And so for my wildcard, I wanted to recommend The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. We have the e-audio on Libby. This also takes place in the past, so you could use it for that category as well. So I picked this book because it was just a lot of fun. I'm actually hesitant to give away too much of the plot because I think the twists are a huge part of its charm. It's very unexpected. The setup, very briefly, is that June Farrow comes from a long line of Farrow women who are all eventually stricken by a mysterious illness or curse, as it may be, and it causes them to see and hear things that aren't really there. So at the beginning of the story, June has just lost her grandmother to this illness, and she herself has been experiencing the same symptoms to a lesser degree, but she hasn't shared with anyone yet. But at the same time, she receives two strange items: a locket that opens up to watch hands, though it doesn't seem to be a functional watch, and an old photograph of the town's minister, who was murdered many decades ago, next to a woman identified as his wife, who also, June notices, looks exactly like her mother, who vanished when June was a baby. So this is very strange because this is a very old photo, which clearly has a picture of her mother who lived many decades later, and it requires a ton of suspension of disbelief, I will say, but the trajectory that this sets her out on is incredible, and the mysteries, the strangeness of it is, it just kept me reading. Like, I could not stop because all of these strange twists and turns, but you learn a lot more about their family curse and what's going on and where that leads June. So I would recommend that if you just want a page turner, super fun, great summer vibes book.
Sounds good. So my wildcard pick is Petabasis by R.F. Kuang. Now, this book does release on August 26th. I was able to get my hands on an early release copy. However, the challenge doesn't end until the beginning of September, so you've got a little time, and you'll be able to get it here at the library once it comes out. It also works for fiction and for a place you've never visited before if you've never been to Cambridge or hell, because this book is about a student named Alice Law and her rival Peter Murdoch, who are both studying magic at Cambridge, a place famed for academic excellence, and they're happening to study under the famed Jacob Grimes, who is the premier magician in the world at this point in time, who's also a man that Alice may or may not have just accidentally exploded in an experiment that went horribly wrong. So in order to save her recommendation and her reputation, and more importantly, her future career, she decides to plunge into the depths of hell and bring her advisor back. Peter, who's her rival, decides to tag along as well, partially because he's taken half of the research that she would have needed to get into hell safely and just kind of been reading it himself, and also for his own mysterious reasons. Hell in this book is such an incredible setting for a story because it twists itself into the most wild and deranged version of Cambridge and the postgraduate higher academia experience that I've ever read. It's funny, it's terrifying, it's endlessly creative, it's so delightful, and the Alice and Peter have to journey through the circles of hell to try and figure out how to save the professor. There's a whole bunch of other complications once they get down there. It's truly an incredible book, and it's well worth a read, even if you don't have that kind of background in like higher academia, if you haven't gone for masters or PhDs or anything like that. It's still just a joy to read as these poor, overworked, harried, and just completely out of their depth college students try to rescue their professor from the depths of hell. A great book, a good summer read.
Yeah, very compelling, I think. It may seem intimidating to dive into it before the challenges, but honestly, you'll be able to get through it pretty fast because you'll want to know what happens to them, is how I would describe it. Yes. I also was able to get my hands on an advanced reader's copy. My last recommendation has nothing to do with hell. I apologize. But my last wild card is another nonfiction book. So if you're not in the mood for science and nature writing, I would highly recommend the very short and accessible nonfiction book, Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. This book has been everywhere, so you might have heard of it. It does seem a little intimidating to read medical nonfiction. This book is less sort of medical history and more persuasive essay. This book is about tuberculosis, how it's shaped human history, and how history shapes disease. And it's also about how the way the world healthcare system is sort of structured means that we have access to cures that the people who need them can't access. So this book I would recommend for nonfiction. We also have it on Libby, I believe. And a lot of this book is set in Sierra Leone. So if you have not been to Sierra Leone, you can absolutely count it for that as well. This is ultimately a plea for humanity and a plea for everyone to have access to high quality healthcare for the good of the entire globe. I highly recommend it.
All right.
And before we finish up, I just want to let everyone know that if you're trying to frantically write down this challenge names and things like that, you don't need to worry. We will, as stated before, we'll have this information for you when the challenge begins. Probably multiple places will definitely have that information for you, what the challenges are with lists and everything like that at the reference desk at the library, and we'll most definitely have something online as well.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap up our recommendations for the summer. We're going to take a brief hiatus, but then we'll be back at the end of September, starting season 7 of Booked Solid. Incredible, right? And this time we're starting with a climate thriller. We will be reading Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. So get ready.
Place your holds now. It's popular.
Yes. Indeed. All right. Well, thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for listening.